everybody, I'm Joe Jackson. Welcome to the Military Aircraft Video Report. Well, get set to learn all about the stealth bomber. We're going to show it to you up close and personal. We'll also get involved in some aerial combat in the skies over the Gulf of Mexico. All that and more is coming up. Here's a preview.
We'll find out about the most advanced airplane in the world today, the super secret stealth bomber. The B-2 is now out in the open. We'll watch the rollout and find out why this plane may be the most important military aircraft of our generation. Then you'll step into the cockpit with the finest fighter pilots in the free world. Each year, the U.S. Air Force holds a competition called William Tell. We'll take you there to see what it's like to launch a live air-to-air missile.
It's extremely exciting and exhilarating, and the pressure is incredible. It's almost overwhelming, but if you stick to your procedures and what you've learned, that's really the only way you can calm yourself while this is going on.
Experience the thrill of your target actually being hit, and find out why being named Top Gun here means you're the best of the best.
Box, box, box.
Hit.
Aces 1, knock it off.
And Rhino 5, knock it off, weapon safe.
We'll also spend some time with the airplane they call the Aardvark. The F-111 is quietly racking up points as the best all-weather fighter bomber ever built. You'll see why in this behind-the-scenes look at the plane that performs regardless of the obstacles. And gaze into the future of military aviation with the radical X-29. This experimental airplane is on the cutting edge, and you'll see why all fighter planes may someday have these unusual forward-swept wings.
We'll get to all of that in just a minute. First, however, we'll take our usual look at some of the latest developments in the world of military aviation. There's plenty going on, starting with the most important transport plane in the Air Force today.
The venerable C-141s of the Military Airlift Command have set a new milestone. The aircraft have now logged more than 8 million flight hours. Multiplying that number by the airplane's cruising speed gives you a total of more than 4 billion miles flown. Or put another way, more than 8,000 trips to the moon. The Air Force has 271 of the aircraft flying in 6 wings on active duty. 1 wing in the Air National Guard, and another in the Air Force Reserve. Still, the airplane began operation with Mach in 1965. That means a new airlifter is going to be needed soon. Enter the new generation. In this building in Long Beach, California, the new C-17 is currently being built by McDonnell Douglas. Designed to take off and land from austere runways around the world, the C-17 will carry heavy military equipment, including tanks, trucks, and helicopters, to small airports, delivering its cargo right where it's needed, when it's needed. The first pieces for the start of C-17 assembly are the 68-foot rails for the cargo floor to hold the heavy equipment.
It's noteworthy, I believe, that the parts that will be assembled here today are parts of our cargo floor. In fact, it's that floor that is the very reason for the existence of this airplane. It'll support our combat troops and their combat equipment.
The first flight of the C-17 is set for 1990. At its peak, the program will account for more than 20,000 jobs for the prime contractor, Douglas Aircraft, and subcontractors around the nation. As you might expect, the Air Force is pretty happy about this future airlifter.
Thank you, Bob, for this opportunity for me very briefly to tell you that on behalf of the men and women of the Military Airlift Command, this is indeed another in a series of momentous times in the life of the C-17.
Elsewhere, Canadian forces are now looking at a time when that government will have to retire, or at least augment, its Sikorsky Sea King helicopters. Generally recognized as one of the finest anti-submarine warfare helicopters in the world, the Sea King is operated by many nations, and in Canada goes under the label CH-124. The aircraft has a watertight hull and retractable landing gear for amphibious capability. It has the reliability of twin turbo shaft engines and a 5-bladed main rotor. For the hunter part of the mission, that is finding hostile submarines, the Sea King is equipped with a dipping sonar and an all-weather stabilization system. It can carry nearly 1,000 pounds of weapons, including homing torpedoes. Having first flown in 1957, it's no wonder the Canadians and other nations are now looking at upgrading. However, few would argue the birds have proven to be reliable and, if need be, deadly. These are Canadian CF-18s deployed in Europe. The Hornet is also being used by the Spanish, and now another European nation is joining the ranks, the Swiss. That nation is going to spend $1.3 billion to buy 34 Hornets. The final agreement is expected to include arrangements to allow Swiss companies to participate in major portions of the subcontracting work. That sort of understanding is standard procedure in most deals involving the sale of military aircraft. The first Swiss F-18 is expected to be operational in 1994 and will join the Canadian Hornets in the already crowded skies of Central Europe. In the U.S. Air Force, there was a growing debate over a possible future role for the F-16 Fighting Falcon. The discussion is over the possible replacement of this airplane, the A-10 Warthog. Eventually, the Air Force would like to see a version of the F-16 Fighting Falcon take over in the close air support role. The thought is that the high speed and rapid maneuverability of the F-16 is what is going to be needed to survive over the battlefield of the future. The U.S. Army is, of course, watching all this very closely. The A-10, with its specialized tank-busting cannon, is a desirable element of any battlefield commander's arsenal. The decision has yet to be made, but it's clear that the A-10 will have to be replaced by some kind of aircraft in the not-too-distant future. Finally, here's an interesting sight showing up at air shows around the country. This unusual-looking plane is an aerospatial CM-170. This French trainer is getting to be scarce, even in Europe. And it's even more interesting seeing it with a U.S. civilian registration. It was flown first in July of 1952 as a trainer. At that time, it was the first jet trainer in the world. During the course of its development, 400 were produced for France. A number of other nations also make use of the airplane, including the Israelis, the Lebanese, the Germans, Finland, and Belgium. We don't know if this is the only one flying around the U.S., but the casual observer may not realize this is a special piece of aviation history being preserved for the future.
Now, it just might be the most important military airplane of the last 50 years. Very few military programs have attracted as much attention and been the subject of such secrecy. Well, now, the stealth bomber has been revealed. So sit back and watch as a piece of aviation history rolls out.
It was a bright, sunny day in the California desert. Here, north of Los Angeles, a select group of observers gather to witness history in the making. It would be the unveiling of an incredible airplane, a step beyond anything that had ever been attempted before. Here, hidden from view for nearly a decade, one of the most secret military projects since the atomic bomb had been taking place. At this moment, the world would see the stealth bomber for the first time. One way to tell this is an important event is by the people who are there to see this airplane see the first light of day. On hand, the Secretary of the Air Force, Edward C. Aldrich. The Chairman of the Northrop Corporation, Thomas Jones. General Larry Welch, the Chief of Staff of the United States Air Force. General John Chain, the Commander of the Strategic Air Command. And General Dick Schofield, the Commander of the Air Force B-2 Development Program. It's a rollout of historic proportions, as any of these men can attest.
We're marking a momentous event to the country, to the Air Force, and certainly for all of us at Northrop and our nationwide industrial team. Now here we have 2,200 men and women of that select society, the B-2 team, that are right here today, representing their co-workers everywhere.
The B-2 is a superb example of the inherent technological advantage of a free enterprise system and of a free society. It will ensure that any potential adversary must face the uniquely effective retaliatory potential of the penetrating bomber.
Today, we're not just rolling out America's new strategic bomber, we're ushering in a new age of strategic deterrence. As we honor this great achievement in the history of strategic aviation, let us all remember America's enduring hope and prayer that the B-2 will strengthen the cause of peace and that this magnificent aircraft will never fly in anger. Thank you.
But enough talk. Americans have been hearing about it for years. Car companies were mimicking it in commercials. Congress has pumped in millions of dollars already. It was time to see what all the fuss was about. What emerges is a design of dramatic departure from anything else in the air. It is essentially a flying wing, standing 17 feet tall and 65 feet long. It's a little longer than an F-15. It has a wingspan of 172 feet, approaching that of a B-52 bomber. The cockpit rises from the smooth wing surfaces and is flanked with 2 low-profile engine inlets. It is powered by 4 General Electric engines, and the airplane will not fly faster than the speed of sound. range is thought to be in excess of 6,000 miles, and it will carry a crew of 2. In many ways, the shape is surprising, and in other ways, it is exactly what you might expect for such a radical new airplane. Either way, those in charge of the effort were suitably pleased.
The Air Force had the vision, and they had the confidence, and our people justified that confidence. The B-2 is the first computer-age airplane, but this airplane wasn't built by computers, and computers didn't replace people. Computers brought people together and gave them the tools they needed to make the most of their own individual skills and imagination. Strategic Air Command pilots have already flown the B-2 for thousands of hours in simulators. This is already their airplane. SAC crew chiefs and the line maintenance people have given us their advice and the benefit of their experience. This is their airplane too. The Air Force logistics people have participated from the outset, and the flight test people at Edwards Air Force Base next door. This is their airplane.
But this airplane, with its complete lack of tail surfaces, obviously has computer-aided or fly-by-wire support. These days, inherently unstable airplanes can be made to fly just fine. Believe it or not, the landing gear is a modified version of that used on a Boeing 767. But what everyone wants to know is, will this airplane really be totally invisible to enemy radar screens? In fact, the answer is no. It can be seen on radar, but as you might imagine, it will be very difficult.
The bomber is not invisible. If the bomber gets close enough to any radar, it will see it. If I set a radar on this stand, I can see that airplane. But the radars are not capable of seeing that airplane at long ranges. And so the flexibility of when having a radar deployed, the airplane avoids flying in the vicinity of radars, which are now very limited in their detection range. We do not have a capability to go after this aircraft ourselves at long ranges, and it's going to be extremely expensive and some future technology to do that in the future.
Secretary Aldridge went on to clear up several other common misconceptions about the airplane.
The idea behind this aircraft is to hold those targets at risk in the Soviet Union. Though that's what deterrence is all about. And when the Soviet Union are beginning to make their targets harder and more mobile, our ability to be able to hold those at risk enhances the deterrence that the nuclear war would never start in the first place. That's the whole idea behind the flexibility of a manned bomber force, and in particular the flexibility of this particular bomber.
And what happens if the Soviets come up with new technology to see the aircraft, despite its stealth qualities?
But the airplane, you have to realize, is probably going to be in the Strategic Air Command's inventory for at least 30 years. And the technologies that's going to be evolved over the next 30-year period to give it ability to go after a variety of targets is going to be significant. And therefore, we believe that this airplane is going to have a significant improvement capability against any variety of targets in the Soviet Union during its lifetime.
Northrop is by no means a newcomer to the world of flying wings. There was a prop and jet-powered flying wing flown by the firm in the 40s. Despite the crash of one of the airplanes, the Air Force placed an order for 30. But the costly program was eventually canceled. Could the same thing happen to this airplane? The B-2 is just the tip of a $60 billion program. And with other Air Force programs facing possible cuts, it's obvious the B-2 is going to have to be a high priority in order to survive the axe in Congress. But observers close to the program say it enjoys bipartisan support, so the stealth bomber will be built. The main question is, how many?
The costing is still underway based upon a revision of the schedule and the program, and when that cost effort is completed and we put it into our budget and we submit it to Congress, we'll tell you what it's going to cost, and that'll be in January.
The rollout took place very near Edwards Air Force Base, which will be the first testing ground and the location where the airplane will first fly. 6 B-2s will be used in the test program, with the first operational deployment at Whiteman Air Force Base, Missouri, in the mid-1990s.
We have much left to do to complete the free flight preparation for the first flight, to wring out the systems in flight test and to produce the remaining aircraft in this program as efficiently as possible.
For now, the stealth bomber is out for all to see. At this point, the airplane still has plenty of secrets that are being kept. There are also many questions still to be answered about its actual flying characteristics and ability to perform on demanding missions. However, on this sunny day, a lot of folks were smiling. Employees who have had to keep their work secret for years could now look at the fruits of their labor and talk. A little anyway. This super secret airplane is now ready to take its place among the milestones of military aviation.
At this point, it looks like the cost of the B-2 could run as high as $450 million per aircraft. But even that is somewhat of a secret for now. We'll continue to follow the B-2 in other programs, so stay tuned. Now, if you want to see some of the best pilots in the world in action, try Tyndall Air Force Base in Florida. You see, every couple of years, some of the top fighter pilots get together for a competition called William Tell. If you're an interceptor pilot, it doesn't get any better than this.
High over the plains of Kansas, some thirsty F-4s come up to refuel. An ordinary occurrence, yes. But the destination of this set of F-4s is one of the most intense competitions a fighter pilot can undergo. These F-4s are heading for Tyndall Air Force Base in Florida, the home of William Tell. They are here from all over the world, from Iceland and Okinawa, from Alaska and Texas, from Oregon and Canada. This is the center of the known world when it comes to fighter interceptor tactics. For several days, once every other year, the best of the best get together to see who is the best of all. William Tell was, of course, the famous archer who was forced to shoot an apple from his son's head. Hitting the target without a miss is exactly what these pilots have in mind. The competition is among teams in two categories, F-15 and CF-18. Also the F-4s, with separate winners in each category. The teams are composed of air crews, controllers, and aircraft maintenance specialists. The team with the highest total points will be the overall meet winner. Here's Major Danny Oliver of the 475th Weapons Evaluation Group, the host unit of William Tell.
Well, in combat, you're being graded in the ultimate. In this case, they are being graded in the ultimate also. And it is the spirit of competition, the spirit of accomplishment, and the spirit of applying your skills at the very top level. These flyers represent world class, and what they learn is when you're under pressure, how you will perform. And they are under the ultimate pressure here with the video real time, all their bosses, their families, and their country looking on.
Not only are we dealing with some of the best pilots in the world, the top equipment is also on hand. Here's the roll call of the hardware being employed by the players in this most competitive game. The F-15 Eagle is the Air Force's top-of-the-line air superiority fighter. Its multi-mission avionics include advanced radar, inertial navigation system, internal electronics countermeasures, and the thrust to make it all go at 2.5 times the speed of sound. As far as weapons go, it carries an internal cannon, Sidewinder heat-seeking, and Sparrow radar missiles. In short, if the Eagle doesn't win the fight, it is usually not the airplane's fault. The Canadians have brought their CF-18 Hornets to the competition. While the U.S. Navy is best known for using the Hornet, the Canadians have their own version, and it has a primary mission as an air superiority fighter. The Hornet will also carry Sidewinder and Sparrow missiles, and it has an internal cannon. Right now, the Canadians are basing them in Germany and throughout Canada, and they also feel right at home here in Florida.
Well, for us Canadians, it's quite a privilege that the USAF let us participate in it, because we're not large enough to have that type of competition. And so I think it might add a little bit of dimension to them, an international dimension, but for us it's a great privilege and we really enjoy it.
That's Major Andre Michaud. And don't let the easygoing attitude fool you. The Canadians love to turn and burn in their Hornets. This particular William Tell marks the last time that F-4s will be used. It is a bittersweet experience, because certainly no bird has had as much colorful history in war and peace. Among the F-4s on hand are the planes flown by the Oregon Air National Guard, the Red Hawks of the 142nd Fighter Interceptor Group. There are also Phantoms here from the 147th FIG from Texas, and New York Phantoms are putting in an appearance as well. Some of these Phantoms are the last MiG killers still in service. And in a way, so is this man. Major General Richard Pascoe used a Phantom to down 2 MiGs in Vietnam. He is the commander of the Air Defense Weapons Center at Tyndall, and says what happens here is as close to combat as they can make it.
Well, certainly I think that we are able to simulate it to an adequate degree that gives us confidence that the performance in this environment will measure up to a combat requirement. That doesn't mean that we're satisfied with it, that we're willing to stop and accept the level of challenge and realism that we're able to generate in this meet this time. We always look for ways that we can enhance that challenge.
Now, let's take a look at the target these pilots will be trying their best to find and engage. This is the QF-100 drone. It's a specially modified F-100 Super Saver, which can be flown by remote control. It is capable of supersonic flight and has a full range of evasive maneuver capability. It can also carry electronic countermeasures to confuse an attacker. In short, it is a worthy, albeit unmanned, opponent.
The QF-100 is a fighter that completed its entire life as a fighter. It was created as a new weapon system and dedicated to the target role. It is a full fighter capable of turns, barrel rolls, all air combat maneuvering that you would see in a opposing aircraft, a MiG if you would fly very similar to what we present to the competitors.
In order to win at William Tell, the pilots must fly what are called profiles. That is, simulate intercepts under a variety of conditions. The entire process is watched by judges and other contestants on this special widescreen. In fact, the images are sent back live by a cameraman flying in a chase plane. That means your fellow contestants will see exactly how well you do instantly.
Now, what we do is we receive feedback from the world of combat, and then we take those maneuvers and we put those into a profile. These 5 profiles represent what we know at this point. If we find that a particular maneuver is called for, obviously we can write a program for it, and you have the human input and then you have the machine fly the maneuver, which will be the same for each competitor.
It makes for some pretty amazing displays of gunnery and flying. All the results are tabulated and posted on a scoreboard that is there for everyone to see. As each aircrew flies a profile, the outcome of the competition becomes more and more clear. Like any other team sport, there are spectators and a rooting section. But flying is only part of the event. Ground crews are graded on how well they perform the support functions. One of the judges is Tech Sergeant Stephen Korn of the Hawaii Air National Guard.
What they're looking for during this operation is technical proficiency of the entire crew, munitions reliability, and overall safety of the operation. Folks put in a lot of long, hard hours, and without the munitions on the aircraft and the gas to fly it, the plane wouldn't do much good sitting on the ground. Very little variation. These crews have been practicing anywhere from 4 to 6 months, and very little variation. It's just the small things that, between the winners and the losers, maybe missing a couple of steps in a checklist or just forgetting some minor thing that determines who wins and who loses.
At last, the planes are loaded, prepped, and inspected. It is out of the hands of the ground crew, and as with combat, the battle is won or lost in the air. Our F-4 crew is now ready for their mission. There was a feeling of exhilaration and high apprehension at the same time. Call it pre-game jitters, if you will. Here's Captain Larry Austin of the Oregon Air National Guard.
It's extremely exciting and exhilarating, and the pressure is incredible. It's almost overwhelming, but if you stick to your procedures and what you've learned, that's really the only way you can calm yourself while this is going on.
That feeling is shared by all the pilots, regardless of the airplane being flown. Captain John Wisniewski flies the F-15 Eagle.
You know, the performance that you do is dictated on how well you do and how well you've trained. Once again, you could get lucky, you could get unlucky, but that's part of the competition. That's such is life.
Suffice to say, the butterflies are the size of condors at this point. Captain Craig Fouché.
Sure, I think everybody does when they come down here. The apprehension of not knowing exactly what to expect and having somebody looking over your shoulder and reviewing and judging every move that you make has a tendency to be a burden on anybody. But with a lot of proficiency and practice and hard work, you can maintain a good confidence level.
Once in the air, the crew settles down to take care of the task at hand. They say the F-4 is old technology, that it just can't compete with the solid-state electronics of the Eagles and Hornets. In a way, that is true. But don't try to tell that to the Phantom jocks. They're out to make the F-4's last hurrah its best. The situation gets more intense as the ground controller vectors the Phantom into action. At this point, there are no more butterflies or condors. It's time to take all the training and use it or lose it.
Hey, Rhino 5, single bogey, 15 to 18,000, tracking 170 cutoff.
I think the first feeling you have is, please don't let me make a mistake. And then the second thing is you just keep thinking over and over, if I can just stick to what I've learned and execute properly, then I'm going to come out all right.
Throughout it all, the pilots are exposed to extremely high G-forces and an awful lot of stress. But the physical rigors are the last things on their minds. The high-speed cat-and-mouse game finally culminates in the fiery launch of the missile.
Fox.
Hit.
Aces 1, knock it off.
And Rhino 5, knock it off, weapon safe.
Rhino 5, knock it off, post attack 080.
And the blazing result of the Phantom's handiwork plunges into the Gulf of Mexico. In the back of the mind, one knows some of the best pilots in the world are watching on the big screen back at Tyndall. And there's a feeling of exhilaration like no other.
That was pretty exciting when they put my score up on the board, and it was pretty exciting when I first heard the results inside. And that moment will stick in my mind, I'm sure, for a long time.
Into the break they come, the F-15s. And the CF-18s. And the F-4s, coming back. Some with disappointment on their minds, others with the exhilaration of victory. It has been a very intense several days, but there are lessons learned by all in attendance.
You know, you find things you could have done better or things that you wish you would have done. On the other hand, you see some of the hard work you've done has paid off when some of the profiles go well for you. So.
One of the main things it does, we've got people here from around the world, and teams get to see what other teams are doing, how they're doing things at home station, and they get some improvements in the way they do business day to day. Learn a lot from each other.
In the end, the final results give the victory to the F-15s from Holloman Air Force Base. It was a good effort for the F-4s as well. The Oregon Air National Guard took 7th place overall and won the competition among the Phantoms. The Red Hawks also beat several F-15 and F-18 outfits as well. So much for new technology.
One thing I'll remember is that we came here considered underdogs by a lot of individuals and units in the active air forces throughout the United States and overseas. And we showed that pilot proficiency, hard work, and enthusiasm can show that even in an old airplane of 63 vintage, we can compete and show ourselves in the Guard as being competitors against new technology, sometimes 15 years more advanced than what we're flying.
Next time, the familiar side of the F-4s will not be seen here. But the men will be back in newer airplanes, looking for that experience that stays with you for an entire career in fighters.
The biggest thing I learned today was, hey, that's why we train. You know, I mean, I was nervous taking off out of here, and I won't, you know, lie about it. But doggone it, when we got out there, it was just like, hey, I've done this before. I've done this 20 times before, and that's what you train for. And to me, if I went to war, I guess I'd really be nervous, just like anyone else would the first 2 or 3 times. But then it's like, this is what we train for. This is the way it is.
And so the competition called William Tell is over. Until next time, that is. Then, once again, the skies will be charged with the excitement of the hunt. Lessons will be learned that can only be learned in the crucible of aerial combat. And we will know who really is the best of the best.
Now that the F-16 is being adapted for the air defense role, it probably won't be long before that airplane is involved in William Tell. Then it'll be even tougher for the F-15s to dominate. In our next story, we examine the fighter plane of the future. This airplane is one of the most technologically advanced in the world. After you see this, I think you'll understand why.
It is a flying test bed for the technology that will lead America's military airplanes into the 21st century. For 10 years, this airplane has been in the making. First as a dream, then slowly, painstakingly, a reality. The first flight was a dream come true for literally thousands of workers at Grumman Aerospace, and for the many others who believe in this stunning new concept in fighter planes. This is the story of the X-29. December 14th, 1984. A day that brought to life a concept in flying that is truly on the cutting edge. However, it was not an easy process to get to this point. Let's start at the beginning in this remarkable story. For years, it has been known that the next generation of tactical aircraft should make several major advances. New planes should be lethal, long-ranged, and highly maneuverable. Hard to defend against. Able to operate from small airfields in densely jammed electronic environments with supersonic efficiency. Aviation technology is to the point today where just about anything can be designed and built. But can it be built affordably? And can we collapse the time between development and deployment? The Soviets have been producing large numbers of aircraft for years. And for years, U.S. analysts have looked upon the planes as inferior in technology. But that is changing, and the next generation of U.S. aircraft must have a clear technological edge and be affordable at the same time. A tall order. One answer to the problem is taking place at the Grumman Aerospace Corporation, where the shape of things to come is in the form of an advanced technology demonstrator airplane called the X-29. The plane is a full-scale piloted vehicle that will take advantage of refined aerodynamics, sophisticated computer controls, advanced materials, and other technologies that will both meet and beat the military challenges of the 1990s and beyond. X-series of airplanes started in the mid-1940s. At that time, we were interested in increasing man's capability to fly faster and higher. It happened with the X-1 of General Chuck Yeager fame. It culminated with the X-15 in the early 1960s, which flew over 6 times the speed of sound at over 350,000 feet. Since that time, however, the X-series of aircraft, like the X-29, are being used to develop the new technologies that will be used by the designers of future aircraft. This latest X program is bringing together several different technologies in one airplane.
The most obvious technical innovation on the X-29 is the wing, which is swept forward for a number of reasons, good aerodynamic reasons, many of which have been successfully tested in the wind tunnel. Basically, a forward swept wing design is potentially more efficient in the transonic speed regime, which means less drag and more maneuverability. And because span-wise flow is toward the fuselage, positive control can be maintained during maneuvering and slow speeds. This will greatly enhance takeoff and landing performance, as well as dogfighting agility.
The wings also make for a smaller airplane, tougher to see and less costly to build and maintain.
Key to the wing design is the use of graphite epoxy advanced composite material for the 27-foot wing covers. Composites provide the stiffness and strength necessary to overcome the classic problem of structural divergence without the weight penalty of a metal structure.
You see, in flight, a forward swept wing bends upward to increase its angle of attack with respect to the airflow. As the aerodynamic forces exceed the strength of the wing, it is literally torn from the airplane. With the use of special composites in the construction process, a forward swept wing can be protected against this problem. Now, when the wing bends up, the leading edges turn down, eliminating the problem.
Another innovation. The forward swept wing has a supercritical cross-section about 1/3 the thickness of a typical supercritical wing. While the thinner wing provides good transonic performance and maneuverability, there is too much curvature or camber at the back of the wing for efficient supersonic flight. Therefore, a discrete variable camber device is installed on the trailing edge of the wing, which allows the curvature of the wing to be changed in flight. Optimizing the shape of the wing is a function of speed, altitude, and angle of attack.
Basically, this system, called a flaperon, moves up and down to act as flaps and to work as ailerons as well. Also, the horizontal stabilizer has been moved forward on the X-29 and is called a canard. It's an all-movable lifting surface closely linked to the wing to better channel the airflow. The interaction of the canard and the wing was the major risk taken with the airplane, but that risk is reduced because of another innovation.
To provide aircraft stability, an advanced flight control system with 3 digital computers continuously monitors what the airplane is doing and compares it to what the pilot wants the airplane to do. The computers then adjust the canards accordingly 40 times a second. The computers also position the trailing edge strakes and the flaperons, which control the shape of the wing, for optimum performance and minimum drag.
And there is actually no mechanical linkage between the pilot and the airplane control surfaces. Everything goes through the computers, which then essentially vote on how to keep the airplane in the air. This takes place up to 40 times a second. All of this technology was unveiled at the rollout, which was attended by a man who would later become President of the United States.
That's a beautiful model, but they got the wing on backwards.
The X-29 represents an important step in the rebuilding of an American defense second to none.
That first flight was a rousing success, with the pilot and the people that built the plane inspired by its performance.
It was a very emotional thing to see the airplane fly and come back in the shape that it came back in.
A very high sense of pride.
Then it lifted off and your heart just kind of stops for a while.
As far as I'm concerned, the airplane can be refueled, turned around, and we can go in a few minutes. It's that good.
The men at Grumman who spearheaded the project are Program Director Robert Romer and Deputy Program Director Glenn Spate. They fought aerodynamic problems that were never faced before. The results are beginning to speak for themselves.
The X-29 will allow the next generation aircraft to cruise efficiently, both in subsonic flight as current fighters do, but for the first time to cruise efficiently supersonically. And that means an airplane that can get to the fight quicker and get there safer, deliver its weapons, and get back out again without being vulnerable to enemy fire.
With each test flight, the Grumman test offices at Edwards Air Force Base would empty out. You would find the workers in another location looking at the automatic telemetry system. This is a complete ground station where every critical function of the X-29 can be monitored from the ground. And within a quarter of a second, the data is fed by satellite to a similar room at Grumman, back on Long Island.
We do a data evaluation on receipt of the data in the station here, and within a half a minute to a minute, the determination is made that the maneuver is good and that we can advise the pilot to go on and start the next maneuver.
Grumman would build just 2 X-29s. One of them was placed on board a ship for the long trip to California via the Panama Canal. It was a bittersweet moment for the hundreds of Grumman workers who toiled to make this dream come true.
What you do reflects upon Grumman and yourself as an individual. It's really pride of workmanship.
It was really something else. It was really fantastic.
The biggest thing that I've ever worked on in my life in aircraft.
Just the engineering in it is fabulous, I think.
The biggest thrill was to see it fly.
For the fourth flight, test pilot Kurt Schrader would be aboard.
The thing that impresses me about the airplane is the talent that has gone in it, the thoroughness, and the performance of the airplane to date indicates that people, that not only did they work hard, but they knew what they were doing.
After more than 98% of the tests were completed, it became clear that the X-29 had 30% better performance than airplanes with aft swept wings. It has flown at over 50,000 feet and traveled at well over the speed of sound. At this point, nearly everything the scientists said it would do, the X-29 is doing. And as the final measure of success, X-29 technology is being incorporated into the Air Force's Advanced Tactical Fighter project. This will not be the end of the X-29. Already new changes are being talked about to test even more advanced concepts. Now, when you see the fighter plane of tomorrow, you can say you saw the airplane that started it all.
When the replacement for the F-16 is built, don't be surprised if that airplane looks a lot like the X-29. Insiders say it's a good bet. Next, we look in on a plane they call the Aardvark. When the F-111 first came out, it was the subject of a lot of controversy. That was several decades ago. But now, there's very little doubt that the Aardvark is without equal in the world today.
There is one aircraft today that flies when others cannot fly. It accomplishes missions at night, in bad weather, and with a larger payload than most other aircraft. And it goes about its routine on the front lines of the free world. It is beyond challenge, one of the finest aircraft ever built. And it is doing a job no other in the NATO alliance can do, now or in the foreseeable future. It was designated the F-111 by the U.S. Air Force in the early 1960s. Designed as a night, all-weather, terrain-following bomber, the F-111 carries out its assignments under any circumstances, any time, any place. Let's look at the early days of this special bird. The F-111 was activated in the late 60s. You see, the first 50 years of aviation history had seen military aircraft evolving in a predictable sequence. One airplane rapidly and logically following another, each pushing the other into obsolescence. But the F-111 was one of the first to break that cycle. Few could have foreseen at the time of its development that a highlight in aviation history was being written. Originally, military planners hoped the F-111 could serve as an interim step for U.S. bomber forces. And now it appears the airplane will be called upon to be a part of U.S. military aviation for a 50-year span. The F-111 is a two-seat, all-weather attack aircraft with derivatives ranging from the RF-111C reconnaissance aircraft to the FB-111. The airplane was never given an official name, but Air Force pilots took one look at that long anteater-like nose and nicknamed the plane the Aardvark. But don't let the rather docile title fool you. This anteater has teeth, sharp teeth. When the first Aardvark was flown in 1964, it represented an entire series of firsts in military aircraft. The first use of swing wings, the first use of afterburning turbofan engines, and the first use of a terrain-following radar that allowed for low-level bombing in adverse weather and at night. One of the most important basing locations for the F-111s today is in England. From RAF Lakenheath and Upper Heyford, the F-111 represents the most powerful offensive strike force in NATO. Hardened shelters protect a total of 8 squadrons of Aardvarks. These are the very planes that performed the daring U.S. bombing raid on Libya. The F-111 can execute its bombing runs at 200 feet or below in any kind of weather, day or night. Perhaps as proof of their respect for the aircraft, the Soviets have always asked that the F-111 be included in any strategic arms limitations talks. A typical mission for the European-based F-111s may begin with a scramble mission. With a precision practiced year-round, the crew will have the aircraft ready for flight in just minutes. As usual, the weather is only incidental to the mission. Once the aircraft has been committed, rain, fog, sleet, none of these conditions can stop it. The Aardvark goes with full afterburners. More than 50,000 pounds of thrust will propel it to supersonic speeds, despite the weight of over 50 tons. In the air, the plane can race along at Mach 2.5 to deliver a payload to targets well over 1,000 miles away. As was proven in Libya, they can go even further with aerial refueling. Target coordinates and navigational information are programmed into an onboard computer. While the aircraft is still out of hostile radar range, the pilot can select automatic terrain following and go in under the radar beams that seek him out. Accuracy of the system has been proven time and time again in Air Force bombing competitions and in Libya, where individual buildings were bombed at night and at high speed.
The airplane is unique. There isn't another jet in the world, either free or Warsaw Pact, that can do what it can do. It's a very potent weapon system, and it has the ability to strike the entire spectrum of targets that the theater commander would want to strike if we ever had to go to war.
This is the main deterrent to the Soviets. Basically, I would say that our job is in time of war for deep penetration to do the utmost damage to the enemy as we possibly can. Low level, high speed, maximum proficiency, accurate bombing.
Along with a reputation for mission effectiveness and survivability, the F-111 has the added advantage of being one of the most cost-effective airplanes in the inventory. Experience has shown that other types of interdiction aircraft have to have tanker airplanes tagging along. Also, electronic support airplanes, command and control planes, forward air control and fighter escort, as well as rotary-winged rescue forces. But the F-111 works alone, doing a tough job better than any other plane in the Air Force. Historians note that the F-111 started its career steeped in controversy over its role and capabilities. But the questions and concerns have been answered. And today, there is only praise for the Aardvark.
Since there is no direct replacement for the F-111 on the drawing boards, you can count on the airplane being upgraded and soldiering on for many years to come. Well, that's all for this edition of the Military Aircraft Video Report. Remember to check out the other programs in the series. I'm sure you'll enjoy them. I'm Joe Jackson. Thanks for watching, and so long for now, everybody.